This is the video for 9-2, but before we start talking about lesson 2, let's review what we learned about in lesson 1. So we learned that any function that can be written in this form is called a quadratic function. And then we learned that this is the parent function of a quadratic function. This is the simplest form of any quadratic function. And in the parent function, the vertex is always at 0, 0. And so that's what we were graphing. We were graphing the parent function, and then we learned that we can shift the vertex up or down based on this value here. So we were graphing quadratic functions when b was 0. Now that is a lot easier than what we're doing today. Today we're going to talk about what to do when b is not 0. How do you graph functions when b is not 0? So there are no notes for this lesson, but I do want you to grab some graph paper and write this down. Y equals x squared minus 6x plus 4. So how do we graph this? Well, the problem is we don't know where the vertex is. The vertex is not as easy to spot as it was on the problems we had in lesson 1. And you can sit there and you can create a table of XY coordinate points, but that could take you a very, very long time if you don't know where the vertex is. You have to know where this graph is going to start to turn. So the first thing you have to do is identify the vertex. Let me show you how to do that. So this is what you need to memorize. X equals negative b over 2a. This is going to tell you two things. This is going to tell you where the x coordinate of the vertex is. It's also going to tell you the equation of the axis of symmetry. And remember what the axis of symmetry is. It's that imaginary line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. It's the imaginary line that divides the parabola in half. Now in Algebra 2, especially if you take pre-AP Algebra 2, you will learn more about where this equation comes from. But right now, you just have to memorize this. So where do I start? What do I do? Well, the first thing you have to do is identify what is your A and what is your B. So remember, this is ax squared plus bx plus c. So here, my a is 1 and my b is negative 6. So what do I do with that? I take that and I plug that into the equation. And I find that the axis of symmetry, the equation for the axis of symmetry is at x equals 3. So that means the x coordinate of my vertex is also at x equals 3. So let me go ahead and graph what it is I know so far. I know that the axis of symmetry is at x equals 3. In other words, that imaginary line that divides this parabola in half is at x equals 3. I also know that the x coordinate of the vertex lies somewhere on this line, but I need to now figure out, well then, what is the y coordinate of the vertex? So, if x is 3, y is 9 minus 18 plus 4. Which is negative 5. So now I know my vertex is at 3, negative 5. There's my vertex. I know that A is positive, so this parabola is going to open up Now I need to go ahead and create my table. I need to find one or two other points, reflect them over the axis of symmetry, and then I will have my graph. So I always say go ahead and find the y-intercept. In other words, find the value of y when x is 0. When x is 0 here, y is 4. So that means I have a point at 0, 4. Okay, now I can go ahead and reflect that point over the axis of symmetry. So what did I do? Well, if this point is 3 units from the axis of symmetry, this point has to be 3 units from the axis of symmetry. That's called a reflection over the axis of symmetry. Let me go ahead and give myself just another point so I have a really nice graph here. All right, well, what is the value of y when x is 1? When x is 1, y is 1 minus 6 plus 4, negative 1. Okay, so now I know I have a point at 1 and negative 1. I'm going to reflect that over the axis of symmetry. Again, if this point is 2 units from the axis of symmetry, this point has to be 2 units from the axis of symmetry. And now I have a parabola. Now what I want you to do is I want you to graph this function, y equals negative x squared plus 4x minus 2. I uploaded these steps for graphing a quadratic equation. I uploaded these steps for you. So print this out and use it while you're doing your homework. And do you like step 4 there? So go ahead and hit pause and go ahead and graph this using these steps. Okay, so I want to go ahead and work this out for you. So step 1 says that I want to find the x-coordinate of the vertex, which is also going to be the equation for my axis of symmetry. So here my a is negative 1 and my b is 4. So x equals negative b over 2a. So my axis of symmetry is at x equals 2. So let me go ahead and create my axis of symmetry there. Well, I know the x-coordinate of my vertex is at 2, so now let me figure out, well then what is the y-coordinate of my vertex? Remember, this right here is negative 4 because this 2 here only goes to the value of x. That's squared. This exponent here only goes to my x, the value of x. It doesn't go to the negative. Be very careful about that. Okay, so then I have negative 4 plus 8 minus 2, so I have 2. So now I know my vertex is at 2, 2. So I'm going to put a point at 2, 2. I know this graph is going to open down because a is negative. So let me go ahead and figure out, well, what's my y-intercept? What is the value of y when x is 0? When x is 0, y is negative 2. So I know I have a point here, and then I want to reflect it. Now I know my parabola is going to look like this, but let me just go ahead and give it another point, just so I can get a really good graph. Let me go ahead and say, well, what is the value of y when x is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? let me go ahead and figure out where this graph is going. And you can pick any values for x. I just want to pick values for x that are going to give me a good graph. Okay, so then now I know that I have a point at 5 and -7. And then I want to reflect it. Okay, so now I have a really nice graph. So that's the process. Those are the basic steps in the process. The process does not change from one question to the next. The only thing that makes some problems more challenging than others is sometimes the math can get more complicated. If you start dealing with fractions, the math can get more complicated. But in those situations, you just need to practice. And if you find yourself making simple mathematical errors, just start the problem over, and I promise you, you will get better and better at the math as it gets more complicated. And if you practice and practice, you will find yourself making less and less mathematical errors as you get better at this.